Psychology, scientific discipline that studies mental states and processes and behavior in humans and other animals. The discipline of psychology is broadly divisible into two parts: a large profession of practitioners and a smaller but growing science of mind, brain, and social behavior. The two have distinctive goals, training and practices, but some psychologists integrate the two. When talk about the early history of psychology, in Western culture, contributors to the development of psychology came from many areas, beginning with philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle. Hippocrates philosophized about basic human temperaments, example, choleric, sanguine, and melancholic, and the associated traits, informed by the biology of his time. He speculated that physical qualities such as yellow bowel or too much blood might underline differences in temperament. See also humor. Aristotle postulated the brain to be the seat of the rational human mind, and in the 17th century, Wang Descartes argued that the mind gives people the capacities for thought and consciousness. The mind decides and the body carry out the decision. A dualistic mind-body split that modern psychological science is still working to overcome. Two figures who helped to found psychology as a formal discipline and science in the 19th century were Wilhelm Wundt in Germany and William James in the United States. James, which comes out the book The Principles of Psychology, 1890, defined psychology as the science of mental life and provided insightful discussions of topics and challenges that anticipated much of the field's research agenda a century later. During the first half of the 20th century, however, behaviorism dominated most of American academic psychology. In 1913, John B. Watson, one of the influential founders of behaviorism, urged reliance on only objectively measurable actions and conditions, effectively removing the studies of consciousness from psychology. He argued that psychology as a science must deal exclusively with directly observable behavior in lower animals as well as humans, emphasized the importance of rewarding only desired behaviors in child rearing, and drew on principles of learning through classical conditioning, which is based on the studies with dogs by the Russian psychologists Ivan Pavlov and thus known as Pavlovian conditioning. In the United States, most university psychology departments became devoted to turning psychology away from philosophy and into a rigorous empirical science. Come to the behaviorism. Beginning in the 1930s, behaviorism flourished in the United States, with B.F. Skinner leading the way in demonstrating the power of operant conditioning through reinforcement. Behaviorists in university settings conducted experiments on the conditions controlling learning and shaping behavior through reinforcement, usually working with laboratory animals such as rats and pigeons. Skinner and his followers explicitly excluded mental life, viewing the human mind as an impenetrable, which is a black box, open only to conjecture and speculative fictions. Their work showed that social behavior is readily influenced by manipulating specific contingencies and by changing the consequences or reinforcement rewards, to which behavior leads in different situations. Changes in those consequences can modify behavior in predictable stimulus-response patterns. Likewise, a wide range of emotions, both positive and negative, may be acquired through processes of conditioning and can be modified by applying the same principles. And concurrently, in a curious juxtaposition, the psychoanalytic theories and therapeutic practices developed by the Vienna trained physician Sigmund Freud and his many disciples. Beginning early in the 20th century and enduring for many decades, were undermining the traditional view of human nature as essentially rational. Freudian theory made a reason secondary. For Freud, the unconscious and its often socially unacceptable irrational motives and desires, particularly the sexual and aggressive, were the driving force underlying much of human behavior and mental illness. Making the unconscious conscious became the therapeutic goal of clinicians working within this framework. The Freud also proposed that much of what humans feel, think, and do is outside awareness, self-defensive in its motivations, and unconsciously determined. Much of it also reflects conflicts grounded in early childhood that plays out in complex patterns of seemingly paradoxical behaviors and symptoms. His followers, the ego psychologists, emphasize the importance of the higher order function and cognitive processes. For example, the competence motivation, the self-regulatory abilities, as well as the individual's psychological defense mechanism. They also shift their focus to the roles of interpersonal relations and of secure attachment in mental health and adaptive functioning. And the analysis of these processes in the clinical settings. And then comes to the next is when after World War II, American psychology, particularly clinical psychology, grew into a substantial field in its own right, partly in response to the needs of returning veterans. The growth of psychology as a science was stimulated further by the launching of Sputnik in 1957 and the opening of the Russian-American space race to the moon. As part of this race, the US government fueled the growth of science. For the first time, massive federal funding became available, both to support behavioral research and to enable graduate training. Psychology became both a thriving profession of practitioners and a scientific discipline that investigated all aspects of human social behavior, child development, and individual differences, as well as the areas of animal psychology, sensation, perception, memory, and learning. Training in clinical psychology was heavily influenced by Freudian psychology and its offshoots, but some clinical researchers working with both normal and disturbed populations began to develop and apply methods focusing on the learning conditions that influence and control social behavior. This behavior therapy movement analyzed problematic behaviors, for example, the aggressiveness, the basal speech patterns, smoking, fear responses, and then there is in terms of the observable events and conditions that seem to influence the person's problematic behavior. Behavioral approach lead to innovations for therapy by working to modify problematic behavior, not through insight, awareness, or the uncovering of unconscious motivations, but by addressing the behavior itself. Behaviorists attempt to modify the maladaptive behavior directly, examining the conditions controlling the individual's current problems, not their possible historical roots. They also intended to show that such effort could be successful without the symptom substitution that Freudian theory predicted. Freudians believed that removing the troubling behavior directly would be followed by new and worse problems. Behavior therapists show that this was not necessarily the case. To begin exploring the role of genetics in personality and social development, psychologists compare the similarity in personality shown by people who share the same genes or the same environment. twin studies compare, which is the identical twins as opposed to the fraternal twins. Okay, it raised either in the same or in different environments. Overall, these studies demonstrated the important role of heredity in a wide range of human characteristics and traits, such as those of the introvert and the extrovert, and indicated that the biological genetic influence was far greater than early behaviorism had assumed. At the same time, it also became clear that how such dispositions are expressed in behavior depends importantly on interactions with the environment in the course of development, beginning in utero. And then comes to the impact and the aftermath of the cognitive revolution. By the early 1960s, the relevance of the Skinnerian approach for understanding complex mental processes was seriously questioned. The linguist Noam Chomsky's critical review of Skinner's theory of verbal behavior in 1959 showed that it could not properly account for human language acquisition. It was one of several triggers for a paradigm shift that by the mid-1960s became the cognitive revolution, which compellingly argued against behaviorism and led to the development of cognitive science. In conjunction with concurrent analysis and advance in areas from computer science and artificial intelligence to neuroscience, genetics and applications of evolutionary theory, the scientific study of the mind and mental activity quickly became the foundation for much of the evolving new psychological science in the 21st century. Psychological scientists demonstrated that organisms have innate disposition and that human brains are distinctively prepared for diverse higher-level mental activities, from language acquisition to mathematics, as well as space perception, thinking, and memory. They also developed and tested diverse theoretical models for conceptualizing mental representations in complex information processing conducted at multiple levels of awareness. They asked such questions as, how does the individual's stored knowledge give rise to patterns or networks of mental representations activated at a particular time? How is memory organized? Or in a related direction, the analysis of visual perception took increasing account of how the features of the environment, for example, the objects, place, and other animals in one's words, providing information, the perception of which is vital for the organism's survival. Consequently, information about the possibilities and dangers of the environment on the one side and the animal's disposition and adaptations efforts on the other became inseparable. Their interactions become the focus of research and theory building. Concurrently, to investigate personality, individual differences, and social behavior, a number of theories made learning theories both more social, which is interpersonal, and more collective. They move far beyond the earlier conditioning and reward and punishment principles, focusing on how a person's characteristics interact with situation, opportunities, and demands. Research demonstrated the importance of learning through observation from real and symbolic models, showing that it occurs spontaneously and cognitively without requiring any direct reinforcement. Likewise, studies of the development of self-control and the ability to delay gratification in young children show that it is crucially important how the situation and the temptations are cognitively appraised. When the appraisal changes, so does the behavior. Thus, the focus shifts from reinforcement and stimulus control to the mental mechanisms that enable self-control. Traditional personality. Trait taxonomies continue to describe individuals and types using such terms as introversion, extraversion, and sociable hostile, based on the broad thread ratings. In new directions, consistent with developments in cognitive science and social psychology, individual differences were reconceptualized in terms of cognitive social variables, such as people's constructs, personal goals and beliefs, and competencies and skill. Research examines the nature of the consistencies and variability that characterize individuals distinctively across situations and over time, and began to identify how different types of individuals respond to different types of psychological situations. The often surprising findings lead to new models of cognitive and affective information processing system. In clinical applications, cognitive behavior therapy (CBT) was developed. CBT focuses on identifying and changing negative, inaccurate or otherwise maladaptive beliefs and thought patterns through a combination of cognitive and behavior therapy. It helps people to change how they think and feel about themselves and others. In time, these cognitive behavioral treatment innovations, often supplemented with medications, were shown to be useful for treating diverse problems, including disabling fears, self-control difficulties, addictions, and depression. In social psychology, beginning in the early 1970s, social cognition, how people process social information about other people and the self, became a major area of study. The research focused on such topics as the nature and function of self-concepts and self-esteem, cultural differences in information processing, interpersonal relations and social communication, and attitudes and social influence processes, altruism and aggressions and obedience, motivation, emotion, planning, and self-regulation, and the influence of people's disposition and characteristics on their dealings with different types of situations and experiences. Recognizing that much information processing occurs at levels below awareness and proceeds automatically, research turned to the effects of subliminal below awareness stimuli on the activations of diverse kinds of mental representations, emotions, and social behaviors. Research at the intersection of social cognition and health psychology began to examine how people's belief, positive illusions, expectations, and self-regulatory abilities may help them deal with diverse traumas and threats to their health and the stress that arises when trying to cope with diseases such as HIV, AIDS, and cancer. Working with a variety of animal species, from mice and birds to higher mammals such as birds, researchers investigated social communication and diverse social behaviors, psychological characteristics, cognitive abilities, and emotions, searching for similarities and differences in comparison with humans. In developmental psychology, investigators identify and analyze with increasing precision the diverse perceptual, cognitive, and numerical abilities of infants and trace their developmental course, while others focus on lifespan development and mental and behavioral changes on the aging process. Developmental research provided clear evidence that humans, rather than entering the world with a mental blank slate, are extensively prepared for all sorts of cognitive and skill development. At the same time, research also has equally impressive evidence for the plasticity of the human brain and the possibilities for change in the course of development. Linking mind, brain, and behavior. Late in the 20th century, methods for Observing the activity of the living brain will develop that make it possible to explore links between what the brain is doing and psychological phenomena, thus opening a window into the relationship between the mind, brain, and behavior. The functioning of the brain enables everything one does, feel, and knows. To examine brain activity, functional magnetic resonance imaging (fMRI) and is used to measure the magnetic fields created by the functioning nerve cells in the brain, detecting changes in the blood flow. With the aid of computers, this information can be translated into image, which virtually light up the amount of activity in different areas of the brain as the person performs mental tasks and experiences different kinds of perceptions, image, thoughts, and emotions. The tasks allow a much more precise and detailed analysis of the links between activity in the brain and the mental state a person experiences while responding to different types of stimuli and generating different thoughts and emotions. This can range, for example, from thoughts and images about what one fears and dreads to those directed at what one craves the most. The result of this technology is a virtual revolution for work that uses the biological level of neuroactivity to address questions that are of core interest for psychologists working in almost all areas of the discipline. Social cognitive, which is the neuroscience. The advances described above lead to the development in the early years of the 21st century of a new, highly popular field, social cognitive neuroscience (SCN). This interdisciplinary field asks questions about topics traditionally of interest to social psychologists, such as person perception, attitude change, and emotion regulation. It does so by using methods traditionally employed by cognitive neuroscientists, such as functional brain imaging and neuropsychological patient analysis. By integrating the theories and methods of its parent disciplines, SCN tries to understand the interactions between social behavior, cognition, and brain mechanisms. Epigenetic. The term epigenetic is used to describe the dynamic interplay between genes and the environment during the course of development. The study of epigenetics highlights the complex nature of the relationship between the organism's genetic code or genome and the organism's directly observable physical and psychological manifestation and behaviors. In contemporary use, the term refers to efforts to explain individual differences in physical as well as behavioral traits, for example, hostility, aggression, in terms of the molecular mechanisms that affect the activity of genes, essentially turning on some genes and turning off others. Epigenetic regulation of gene activity plays a critical role in the process of development, influencing the organism's psychological and behavioral expressions. Thus, while the genome provides the possibilities, the environment determines which genes become activated. In the early 21st century, there emerged evidence for the important role of the environment, for example, in maternal behavior with the newborn, in shaping the activity of genes. Epigenetic factors may serve as a critical biological link between the experiences of an individual and subsequent individual differences in brain and behavior, both within and across generations. Epigenetic research points to the pathway through which environmental influence and psychological experiences may be transformed and transmitted at the biological level. It thus provided another route for the increasingly deep analysis of mind-brain behavior, links at multiple levels of analysis, from the psychological to the biological. And then when it comes to the evolving scope and structure of psychological science, the discoveries and advance of psychological science keep expanding its scope and tools and changing its structure and organization. For most of the 20th century, psychological science consisted of a variety of specialized subfields with little interconnection. They range from clinical psychology to the study of individual differences and personality, to social psychology, to industrial organizational psychology, to community psychology, to the experimental study of such basic processes as memory, thinking, perception, and sensation, to animal behavior, and to physiological psychology. In larger academic psychology departments, the list got longer. The various subfields, each with its own distinct history and specialized mission, usually were bundled together within academic departments, essentially a loose federation of unrelated disciplines, each with its own training program and research agenda. Late in the 20th century, this situation began to change, fueled in part by the rapid growth of developments in cognitive science and social cognitive neuroscience, including the discovery of new methods of studying cognition, emotion, the brain, and genetic influences on mind and behavior. In the early years of the 21st century, psychology became an increasingly integrative science at the intersection or the hub of diverse other disciplines, from biology, neurology, and economics to sociology and anthropology. For example, simulated by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman's theory of decision-making under race, new areas developed, including behavioral economics and decision-making, often being taught by psychologists in business schools. Likewise, advance in collective neuroscience led to the subfield of neuroeconomics. In another direction, links deepened between psychology and law. This connection reflected new findings in psychology about the nature of human social behavior, as well as the fallibility of eyewitness testimony in legal trials and the distortions in retrospective memory. And then likewise, with recognition of the role of mental processes and self-care behavior in the maintenance of health, the fields of behavioral medicine and health psychology emerged. These subfields study links between psychological processes, social behavior, and health. At the same time, within psychology, all subdisciplinary boundaries were crossed more freely. Interdisciplinary teams often work on the common problem using different methods and tools that draw on multiple levels of analysis, from the social to the cognitive and to the biological. Okay, so then I will pass my mic to Wang.
Now I will talk about the facts about psychology. Psychology is the study of behavior and the mind. Persons with a condition that affects their mental health may benefit from assessment and treatment with a psychologist. A psychologist may offer treatments that focuses on behavioral adaptations. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor who is more likely to focus on medical management of mental health issues. Branches of psychology are different types of psychology that serve different purposes. There is no fixed way of classifying them, but here is some common types, like clinical psychology. Clinical psychology integrates science, theory, and practice in order to understand, predict, and relieve problems with adjustment, disability, and discomfort. It promotes adaptation, adjustment, and personal development. A clinical psychologist concentrates on the intellectual, emotional, biological, psychological, social, and behavioral aspects of human performance throughout a person's life, across varying cultures and socioeconomic levels. Clinical psychology can help us to understand, prevent, and alleviate psychologically caused distress or dysfunction and promote an individual's well-being and personal development. Psychological assessment and psychotherapy are central to the practice of clinical psychology, but clinical psychologists are often also involved in research, training, forensic testimony, and other areas. Besides that, we will talk about the cognitive psychology. Cognitive psychology investigates internal mental processes such as problem solving, memory, learning, and language. It looks at how people think, perceive, communicate, remember, and learn. It is closely related to neuroscience, philosophy, and linguistics. Cognitive psychologists look at how people acquire, process, and store information. Practical applications include how to improve memory, increase the accuracy of decision making, or how to set up educational programs to boost learning. Developmental psychology is the scientific study of systematic psychological changes that a person experiences over the lifespan, often referred to as human development. It focuses not only on infants and young children, but also teenagers, adults, and older people. Factors include motor skills, problem solving, moral understanding, acquiring language, emotions, personality, self-concept, and identity formation. It also looks at innate mental structures against learning through experience, or how a person's characteristics interact with environmental factors and how this impacts development. Developmental psychology overlaps with fields such as linguistics. Behavioral neuroscience, also known as biopsychology, biological psychology, or psychobiology, is the study of biological factors that may affect the brain and human behavior. Biopsychologists study individuals and perform research to see if there are biological factors that impact how an individual feels, thinks, and acts. This field of psychology also looks at how brain injury and disease affect behavior. With this information, researchers can work on determining ways to prevent and treat brain trauma. Behavioral psychology. The purpose of behavioral psychology is to understand the most basic form of human action. Behavioral psychologists conduct research to understand what drives human behavior and how the mind connects behavior. This type of psychology may involve improving negative behaviors, such as addiction. Behavioral psychologists often work in universities or clinical settings like hospitals or private practice. Community psychology research health issues to educate society and create programs that help prevent wide-reaching issues from occurring. For instance, they might find solutions to environmental problems or political disputes. Community psychologists commonly work in schools, community organizations, charities, and government agencies. One main focus of community psychology is improving the community and the people who live within it. Comparative psychology examines the similarities and difference between the behavior of humans and that of their animal counterparts. Those who work in comparative psychology may observe how animals behave and respond to certain situations or stimuli, using those results to better understand human behavior. The foundation of this discipline is the underlying assumption that the laws of behavior are constant across all species. Consumer psychology. Consumer or marketing psychology is the study of consumer behavior and marketing and communication techniques used to influence consumer decisions. Consumer psychology can help organizations identify their target audience, the driving factors behind purchasing behaviors, and how consumers feel about a particular product or service. Consumer psychologists conduct market research surveys, form focus groups, and observe consumers in retail settings. Critical psychology is the study of the disciplines itself. Critical psychologists look at how psychology evolved and seek to identify any associated trends that might benefit the field. This reflective and analytical approach challenges mainstream conventions to build a more comprehensive discipline prioritizing social justice and equality. Educational psychology. Educational psychology studies how humans learn and use their findings to create resources and strategies to improve the learning process. Most educational psychologists work in elementary and secondary schools or college and universities. Others work in private practice or in organizations that provide training to their employees. Individuals working in educational psychology may provide teaching techniques for certain groups of students, like those with learning disabilities and those with demonstrate excellence in learning. Educational psychologists also research how cognitive and social elements can affect learning. Environmental psychology studies how physical environments affect human behaviors and mental processes. Environmental psychologists also want to understand how people's behavior can impact their surroundings. Environmental psychologists often work with businesses, non-profits, and government agencies to address complex issues such as climate change, urban planning, environmental design, resource protection, and pollution protection. Health psychology. Health psychologists work at universities, hospitals, health clinics, businesses, and government agencies where they study how behavior affects health and help design programs that promote good health and prevent illness. Health psychologists may research how they can use these factors to improve an individual's overall health and wellness or treat a particular illness they may have. Individuals who work in health psychology educate their patients about what they can do to remain healthy, provide therapy, and educate patients on coping mechanisms. Industries. Educational psychology. Educational psychology studies how humans learn and use their findings to create resources and strategies to improve the learning process. Most educational psychologists work in elementary and secondary schools or college and universities. Others work in private practice or in organizations that provide training to their employees. Individuals working in educational psychology may provide teaching techniques for certain groups of students, like those with learning disabilities and those with demonstrate excellence in learning. Educational psychologists also research how cognitive and social elements can affect learning. Environmental psychology studies how physical environments affect human behaviors and mental processes. Environmental psychologists also want to understand how people's behavior can impact their surroundings. Environmental psychologists often work with businesses, non-profits, and government agencies to address complex issues such as climate change, urban planning, environmental design, resource protection, and pollution protection. Health psychology. Health psychologists work at universities, hospitals, health clinics, businesses, and government agencies where they study how behavior affects health and help design programs that promote good health and prevent illness. Health psychologists may research how they can use these factors to improve an individual's overall health and wellness or treat a particular illness they may have. Individuals who work in health psychology educate their patients about what they can do to remain healthy, provide therapy, and educate patients on coping mechanisms. Industrial and organization psychology focus on the behavior of employees in the workspace. Psychology aims to help organizations, universities, businesses, and government agencies with work issues like hiring processes, training motivation, job satisfaction, performance measurement, reward system, and consumer behaviors. Military psychologists provide services to service members, veterans, and their families to help them overcome issues such as stress, substance abuse, the transition back to civilian life, and post-traumatic stress. Many military psychologists assist with developing recruitment strategies and help leaders understand how to motivate soldiers and work with those experiencing emotional distress. Military psychologists are usually active members of one of the armed forces, but they may also be a civilian working at a university, corporation, or military base. Personality psychology studies an individual's attributes and how they can affect their behavior. These psychologists may seek to understand environmental and biological factors that influence one's personality. They also study and treat personality disorders, and may conduct personality testing as part of pre-employment screening process. Psychometric psychology focuses on developing psychological tests and assisting in their administration to specific people or groups. These tests can be helpful for understanding employees, customers, patients, or children. Examples of tests include IQ and aptitude tests that measure an individual's intelligence and ability to perform certain tasks. They often work at companies that create and provide tests designed to measure educational achievement or as faculty members at universities. Rehabilitation psychology helps people with disabilities and chronic health issues. Psychologists in this field teach coping mechanisms and ways patients can improve their life. They typically work in rehabilitation centers, assisted living facilities, and long-term care hospitals. Research psychology, also called as experimental psychology. It involves studying memory, decision-making, attention, learning, perception, sensation, or emotion. Research psychologists typically publish their findings and share their results with others in a field to provide valuable information that expand industry knowledge. The process also involves designing and monitoring experiments and developing hypotheses. The research typically occurs in university settings. School psychologists work in educational settings to assist students. They may elaborate and treat issues related to social settings, academics, and behavior. School psychologists develop plans alongside teachers, parents, and administrative staff to address any situation where a student may face a particular challenge. One goal of school psychology is to create a learning environment that is safe and productive for everyone. These psychologists may also meet with students who would benefit from advice and therapy to handle a stressor in school. Sport psychology. Sport psychology aims to provide athletes with strategies to enhance their performance, overcome problems, and achieve their goals. The field emphasizes team building, positive communication, anxiety reduction, and injury recovery. A sports psychologist can work with amateur or professional teams. In university settings, they might study violence, stereotyping, and gender or racial bias. Abnormal psychology looks at psychopathology and abnormal behavior. It involves the study of people's emotion, thought, and behavior patterns to identify, understand, and potentially resolve any issues that may be negatively affecting a person's life. Mental health professionals in this branch of psychology assess, diagnose, and treat a wide variety of psychological disorders, including anxiety and depression. Counselors, clinical psychologists, and psychotherapists often work directly in this field. Counseling psychology. Counseling psychology is one of the largest areas of psychology. It is centered on treating clients in mental distress who may be experiencing a wide variety of psychological symptoms. The Society of Counseling Psychology explains that professionals working in this type of psychology can improve their clients' interpersonal functioning throughout life. They do this by improving the client's social and emotional health, as well as addressing concerns about health, work, family, marriage, and more. Cross-cultural psychology. Cross-cultural psychology is a branch of psychology that looks at how cultural factors influence human behavior. This may involve looking at differences between collective and individualist cultures. For instance, cross-cultural psychologists might also look at how cultures vary in terms of emotion, personality, or child development. The International Association of Cross-Cultural Psychology, IACCP, was established in 1972. This type of psychology has continued to grow and develop since that time, with increasing numbers of psychologists investigating how behavior differs among cultures throughout the world. Evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology looks at how human behavior, for example, language, has been affected by psychological adjustment during evolution. An evolutionary psychologist believes that many human psychological traits are adaptive in that they have enabled us to survive over thousands of years. Forensic psychology. Forensic psychologists involve applying psychology to criminal investigation and the law. A forensic psychologist practices psychology as a science within the criminal justice system and civil courts. It involves assessing the psychological factors that might influence a case or behavior and presenting the findings in court. Occupational psychology. Occupational or organizational psychologists are involved in assessing and making recommendations about the performance of people at work and in training. They help companies to find more effective ways to function and to understand how people and groups behave at work. This information can help improve effectiveness, efficiency, job satisfaction, and employee retention. Social psychology. Social psychology uses scientific methods to understand how social influence impact human behavior. It seeks to explain how feelings, behavior, and thoughts are influenced by the actual, imagined, or implied presence of other people. A social psychologist looks at group behavior, social perception, nonverbal behavior, conformity, aggression, prejudice, and leadership. Social perception and social interaction are seen as key to understanding social behavior. That's all from me. Thank you.